All right, let's see how we can implement a suggestion list in HTML. So we have a basic text field. Now we want to provide a list of suggestions when the user types something into this text field. So after this input field, first we define a data list element. Now VS Code doesn't recognize this, so if I press tab, nothing happens. So here we have to add a left angle bracket and then close it. Good. Now inside this data list, we can add a bunch of options. So let's add an option. Now we'll talk about the value attribute in a second. So let's remove it for now. Here we're going to type the name of countries. For example, we can say Australia, then Canada, India, and United States. Just a few examples. Now, we want to associate this data list with this input field. So first we have to give it a unique identifier, like countries. Now, here we set the list attribute to countries. Now, let's see what we get. So when this text box gets focused, we see our suggestion list. And this is implemented natively in our browser. A lot of people are not familiar with this. They reach out to third-party plugins for implementing a suggestion list. Now, in case you're curious about the support, let's look at caniuse.com and search for data list. Look, 95% of the browsers out there support data lists. So back to our page. Here we can type Australia and select from the list, or we can type a country that is not in the list. Let's say Japan. So this is how suggestion lists work. The user is still free to type any text they want into this text field. If you want to prevent the user from typing an invalid value, then you would have to use a drop-down list, which we're going to talk about in the next lesson. Now, what about values? So quite often, when we select something from the list, we want to send a numeric value to the server. For example, on the server, we might have a database with a list of countries. In this database, each country is going to have a unique identifier. So when submitting this form, we want to send that unique identifier so on the server, we know what country the user has selected. Now, if we set the value attribute here to a numeric value or any value that uniquely identifies this country, now we see this value here. That is ugly. We don't want to show the user these unique identifiers. So here's a trick. We can use a data attribute. So in HTML, if we type data dash, we can create our own custom attribute. Then later, using JavaScript, we can read the value of this attribute and submit it to the server. Now, that's outside the scope of this course. I'm just giving you an idea of how this should be done. With this change, we no longer see that value in our suggestion list. Also, when working with these suggestion lists, we want to turn off the autocomplete feature of the browser. So if the user has previously typed something in this text box, we don't want the browser to show an extra tooltip for auto-completing this value. So back to our input field. Here we set autocomplete to off. This turns off the native autocomplete feature in the browser so it doesn't clash with the autocomplete that we have implemented here. Now, what about the look and feel of the suggestion list? Well, every browser has their own implementation of this feature. So what you see here is how this suggestion list works in Chrome. If you open this page in Firefox or another browser, you're going to see something different. If you want to make sure that your suggestion list looks consistent across different browsers, you have to style it yourself. However, if we define a rule for our data list or option elements, the styles that we define here will not be applied. The browser's default styles will take over. So how can we fix this problem? Well, that goes beyond the scope of this course, but let me show you a web page where you can find a working example. So let's search for HTML data list element. Once again, we're going to go to developer.mozilla.org. On this page, we can see a working example of a data list with a custom style. Here's the trick though. To make this work, we have to set the list attribute to an empty string so we can define custom styles for data list and option elements. Then we'll have to use JavaScript. So when the input element gets focused, we manually display the suggestion list. Again, this goes outside the scope of this course because we are not talking about JavaScript here. So this is all about data lists. Next, we're going to talk about drop-down lists.